Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present my fourth budget speech dealing with each of the areas that I have the privilege to have responsibility for. Mr. Speaker, before I get into the substance of what I'd like to discuss and address the Parliament with today, I think it's important to touch on a number of areas which we've been talking about, both at this time at budget session, but also in the immediate period, where I think all members of the House recognise the really quite challenging time in which we're living. I don't believe Gibraltar in recent years has had to face to the challenges that we have this past 12 months since the vote in the referendum. And consequently, Mr. Speaker, it is my view that as politicians, we all have an extra responsibility in this particularly challenging time to take what we do more seriously, to look and consider at all the aspects of what each and every one of us does in our political lives, because the challenges are, Mr. Speaker, serious. And when I consider some of the exchanges that we've been having, and I've been listening to in the last day and also in the last week, particularly, for example, the incidents over the concern of the GST on our security, and that concern was expressed by posting a photograph on the World Wide Web of a hole in our frontier fence, which had been fixed 3 weeks before, is just not serious, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, I don't believe that we are the only ones that were concerned and did not agree with that statement, because on the very Facebook page of the GST, that post, that press release, only had 4 likes. And when you think, Mr. Speaker, that there are 6 members of the GST opposition, it's clear that not even they agreed with the very statement that Mr. Phillips released. Mr. Speaker, we really do need to do serious politics. We really do need to be more mature in the way that we think, in the way that we operate, to express a concern about security, and then to predicate on that a photograph on the World Wide Web of a breach of our fence. Had it been real, thankfully it wasn't because it was already blocked, and not to recognise the need that there is to maintain, especially at this time, security to the best of our ability, was, in my view, completely irresponsible and completely outrageous, as the Chief Minister himself described. Mr. Speaker, if I can move on to the contributions of the 2 big guns of the GST, who has spoken yesterday. And I don't use the term big guns because I believe them to be big guns, but only because they're much bigger than the others that will follow them.
That's what they have left.
So what is it that they've told us? Well, in the same way as we have the gimmick of the security fence, something that they think will resonate with people, we now have the new gimmick. And the new gimmick, Mr. Speaker, is really to dramatise, to today's front page of the Chronicle. Feetham denounces dangerous farce that undermines parliamentary governance. Another gimmick, Mr. Speaker. The opposition have demonstrated, again in my view, their irresponsibility and the lack of serious thought and process, because what in fact they are doing by voting against the budget because of what they call a farce, they're voting against the funding for our health services, our schools, our police, our fire brigade, our ambulances, our civil service, indeed, Mr. Speaker, even this House. Why? What is it that we have done in the budget book that is different to what has ever been done before? Mr. Speaker, you end up asking yourself, is this the same GST that was in government for 16 years? Well, Mr. Speaker, with the exception of the father of the opposition, if I can call him that, it doesn't look like it. Mr. Speaker, yes, some have gone, and then some more have gone, and then even more recently, the good lady has gone. But how can a party that has been in government for almost 16 years, with the trust of the people for that period, lack the very basic element of consistency in philosophy and political belief? Because, Mr. Speaker, you have to measure a party by its record. You have to measure a party by what it says in this House. And of course, Mr. Speaker, you have to measure what they say against what they have done. And when you compare the GST of today and the GST of yesterday, let's look at precisely what they're complaining about. Mr. Speaker, I'd start with the use of companies. I contested the 1996 by-election with the Father of the House, where the GST spent the best part of a year talking about the secret web of companies that the GSLP were managing and using to run this place. Mr. Speaker, it was a suggestion of, I'll put it blandly, corruption. It was a suggestion of improper and inappropriate accounting. It was a suggestion of many things, but all relating to the use of private companies by the government for the manner in which they ran the administration. And so, Mr. Speaker, if you were going to be consistent, the first thing you do after you get into Parliament is stop the companies. But of course, Mr. Speaker, as we all know, for 16 years they ran the companies, and indeed, if memory serves me right, they actually expanded the use of the companies. But, Mr. Speaker, that's not enough, because when they now come to this Parliament and talk to us about transparency, lack of accountability, isn't it odd, Mr. Speaker, that in those 16 years, in all of the companies that they operated to run the public administration, they never even filed accounts? The accounts of these companies were never filed in 16 years of them being in government. And they come and talk to us about transparency, about accountability. Mr. Speaker, these are just words which the public will know, we've been there before, are simply not serious. And the use of off-balance sheet accounting, Mr. Speaker, have they forgotten, for example, the hospital, which is a lease and lease back, so it's not debt, it's rent? Have they forgotten the things that in 16 years of GST government were used and done every minute of the day? And that is exactly what today they are complaining about. It's as if, Mr. Speaker, it's all right for them to do it, but not for anybody else to do it. So it's wrong when we do it, but it was absolutely fine when they did it. And then, of course, the Minister of Finance should not be the Chief Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps could be the reason why Mr. Clinton's life in the old GST was short-lived. I can imagine him suggesting to Sir Peter Caruana that he should not be the Minister of Finance, there should be somebody else, you can't be the CEO and the Chairman, and therefore he should move on. Mr. Speaker, never in a million years would the current Leader of the Opposition have had the thought, or courage, better said, to suggest to Sir Peter that he should move on and let him or another become the Minister for Finance. Sir Speaker, we know the function of the Minister of Finance, and we know that it has always been up and, well, certainly since the new constitution, in the domain of the Chief Minister, and it's absolutely right and proper that it is. Mr. Speaker, all of these things, when they climb them up together, lead them to the conclusion that we should have a Public Accounts Committee. Well, Mr. Speaker, again, when you've been in government for 16 years, surely, you might have mentioned it in the 16 years. Surely you might have said, maybe we should consider, not like now when they're in opposition, they demand that we have a Public Accounts Committee. So, again, what is it that's changed since 2011 to today that makes them believe that we should have a Public Accounts Committee? That we should have civil servants in here cross-examined by members of Parliament as to why they've taken decisions? Mr. Speaker, surely politicians are here to take responsibility. And we have no fear in taking responsibility for everything, absolutely everything we do. And indeed, for those that will remember political history, this Parliament has had a Public Accounts Committee before, and it was stopped. It was stopped for good cause. And when the review was carried out more recently, it also did not recommend a Public Accounts Committee. So why now? Well, the answer is simple. The answer is simple. If they were in government, I have absolutely no doubt that we would not have a Public Accounts Committee. And interestingly, whilst we were in opposition, we never suggested to the government at the time that they should have a Public Accounts Committee, because we don't believe it works in a community like ours. And consequently, Mr. Speaker, my plea is, let's be consistent. Let's think through the things that we need to be dealing with. Let's look at the challenges, but let's stop the drama, or I would call, more appropriately, the farce that we've heard in the past day as to how this opposition believes this government should be running its affairs. Mr. Speaker, moving on swiftly, I'd like to start with financial services. Mr. Speaker, the result of the Brexit referendum in June 2016 was not initially viewed as a positive development for Gibraltar, or indeed its financial services sector, as the loss of our EU passporting rights was unwelcome. It became clear to us in the months following the referendum that the actual volume of business being conducted throughout the European Union was actually small. And we were predominantly a jurisdiction which worked strongly with the United Kingdom, the world's fifth largest economy. Mr. Speaker, I must pause to mention, applaud, and commend the exceptional work of my friends, the Honourable Dr. Joseph Garcia, our Deputy Chief Minister, and Mr. Michael Llamas, QC, our Attorney General, for their precise, detailed, and methodical work in preparing our heat maps of our entire economy, which enabled us to engage quickly with others with accurate, factual, and compelling data. The many months of very hard work have been invaluable, and they should both be most seriously commended for this work. Mr. Speaker, I must also mention my friend, the Chief Minister, who has since the referendum demonstrated and proven himself to be a remarkable leader. Mr. Speaker, we needed calm action, intelligence, and strategic thinking at a time when we were facing our most uncertain period in recent history. He led the team, Mr. Speaker, with our Deputy Chief Minister and Attorney General, which met with the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Foreign Secretary, Secretary of States, ministers, officials, and secured by last October a commitment from the United Kingdom government for UK access, which has enabled us all to focus on the opportunities that this will bring. Mr. Speaker, I cannot stress enough the importance of his work this past 12 months. And on behalf of our entire business community, I thank him for his staggering effort and leadership, which has much strengthened confidence in these difficult times across the entire business community. Mr. Speaker, in considering opportunities and the relevance of UK market access, we must remind ourselves that there are a large number of financial services firms that passport their services into the United Kingdom from continental Europe. Whilst most of the UK press has been about UK businesses needing to plan their post-Brexit strategies in order to protect their existing markets, there has not been so much press about passporting services into the UK post-Brexit. Gibraltar's unique trading relationship with the UK allows us to position ourselves as a gateway to the UK and the world's fifth largest economy, both today and post-Brexit. Mr. Speaker, this is especially true in the insurance sector, where we continue to work with firms considering Gibraltar as their base for business, complying with EU legislation and regulatory standards, but with a pro-business friendly approach and culture. Mr. Speaker, the Chief Minister has already mentioned on a number of occasions the 26 licences that the FSC has granted since the Brexit vote and the 20-odd that are in the pipeline. It is important, Mr. Speaker, to reflect as to why this is happening and to obviously welcome and encourage more to come. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there are also a number that are not within those lists, which are what we call the pre-application stage, in other words, in discussions, but applications not formally submitted. Mr. Speaker, we continue to work with delivering Part 7 transfers from the UK, and recent court decisions will, we believe, facilitate this, and in further developing other structures which we are working on with the Financial Services Commission and the professional sector. In the last 12 months, we have worked with a number of parties about establishing new life insurance companies in Gibraltar, in particular for pension transactions such as bulk annuity transfers and longevity swaps. The number of these types of transactions have been gaining momentum in recent years, and the expectation is that this sector will expand considerably over the next 5 to 10 years. We intend to position Gibraltar as a domicile for this type of insurance activity. Mr. Speaker, the new personal pensions regulations were introduced at the end of March 2017 and were drafted to ensure that the CUROPs continued to meet the requirements of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which were due to change with effect from the 6th of April 2017. There has been a number of profound changes to the CUROP sector over the last 12 months, which HMRC removing a number of jurisdictions from its recognised CUROPs list and introducing, to our surprise, a new 25% levy on pension transfers from the UK, which, whilst not affecting all transfers, is likely to lead to a significant reduction in CUROPs business for Gibraltar and many other CUROPs domiciles. Having worked with HMRC since December 2015 in this area, the result was deeply disappointing, and we continue to work to explore opportunities in this space. We remain committed to supporting the pension sector as it seeks to introduce new pension and savings products and to begin to reposition itself following the unexpected introduction of the 25% levy on pension transfers. Mr. Speaker, we are also exploring further improvements to the PCC legislation with the sector to enable their further use, and we expect these to be considered fully with the GFSC very shortly. The insurance and pension sector, Mr. Speaker, are very well represented by Mr. Michael Ashton, who has the energy and drive of a teenager, but the knowledge and experience of a master. It rings similar, Mr. Speaker, although not comparable to the father of the house. We are indeed fortunate to have him and, of course, Mr. Speaker, the father of the house. Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, we completed the review and implementation of what has become known as the STEP legislation. The enactment of the Private Foundations Act completed the delivery of the STEP Gibraltar wish list submitted to government some years ago. I am grateful to the private sector and in particular the STEP Association for their support in helping us to complete this process. Mr. Speaker, family offices is one of the areas that we have particularly focused on and continues to provide successful outcomes, impacting favourably across a number of specialist practice areas for local professional firms. We have agreed a way forward with the Philanthropy Forum and will continue the good work they have started in reviewing our legislation and making it fit for purpose. Mr. Speaker, in May, we published for extensive public consultation a document entitled, and I agree with my friend, it is a mouthful, Proposals for a DLT Regulatory Framework, the result of a huge amount of work undertaken by government, the Cryptocurrency Working Group, and the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission, as well as a number of leading representatives in this field. The consultation period ended in early June, and we are currently considering the feedback received. The interest generated by this proposed regulatory approach has been significant, and we hope and expect to introduce this framework in January 2018. We believe Gibraltar is well placed to move swiftly in this interesting and fast-moving area. My sincere thanks to the Cryptocurrency Working Group, the GFSC and Sian Jones, our consultant, for their professional and dedicated work, which of course is ongoing. Mr. Speaker, the fintech space is a fascinating area. And although, as the Honourable Member mentioned yesterday, there is risk attached, it is an area which is attracting considerable interest, and the framework that we proposed is innovative, it's new, and no other jurisdiction has approached regulation of this sector in quite the same way. And as a consequence, we've been delighted to receive the interest that we have. The framework will actually seek to regulate people for DLT where they're not already regulated. So, if somebody already has a banking license or a MiFID license or a funds license, they won't actually need to obtain a new license. They'll simply need to add on to their existing license the fact that they will be engaging in DLT. This will mean that it will shortcut and short-circuit the need for many of our financial services professionals today to specifically apply for new licenses. And similarly, if we have people exclusively engaged in DLT, they will be able to obtain their own license. Mr. Speaker, our Category 2 and HEPS products continue to provide effective solutions and are attractive to the international client. As the Chief Minister announced recently, we will reconvene the Cat 2 working group to further consider their proposals. We also to continue to grow our social media presence as a method of increasing awareness to a wide yet appropriate audience at a very low cost. Our database stands in excess of 5,100 individuals, which we interact with almost on a daily basis. Our electronic bookshelf, hosted on issue.com, now has 137 publications covering the full range of topics that are of interest to our readers. These include self-generated fact sheets, articles, manuals, and guides created by private sector firms. Our audience has read these publications more than 11,150 times. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Paul Ostengo has driven all of these important projects forward, as well, of course, as dealing with the continued business development throughout the United Kingdom and Switzerland. He is a joy to work with and ever dependable in the many areas we have asked him to work in, a true and trusted professional. Mr. Speaker, in the area of funds, we have worked more closely than ever with the Gibraltar Funds and Investment Association, or GIFIA, reviewing our legislation, considering improvements and new innovative changes which will serve us well in the future as we face the post-Brexit era. As the Chief Minister announced at the recent accountants' dinner, we expect to have the first phase of changes in our legislation in early July. I am most grateful to Mr. Adrian Hogg, its President, as well as Jay Gomez, Joey Garcia, and James Lasry, all of whom work closely together with the Executive to deliver the best for their sector and Gibraltar PLC. I must also thank, Mr. Speaker, Sarah Hall and Julian Saccarello from the Financial Services Commission, who have made this happen. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Tim Haynes, working at Gibraltar House in London, continues to support the funds and private client space in London, where his extensive knowledge and contact base in this sector have contributed to the success of events hosted at Gibraltar House, and this will continue as we now start with GIFIA in hosting monthly seminars in London targeting the professionals in this area. The time dedicated to business development remains strong, with Mr. Ostengo and Mr. Haynes focusing primarily in London and the UK generally, and Mr. Ashton focusing in Asia, together with Mr. Jason Cruz, whose sterling support continues to open up opportunities across all sectors of our business community in Asia. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to update Parliament on the progress of the Gibraltar International Bank. I am delighted, Mr. Speaker, to report that the bank continues to deliver above expectation in both its performance and its service levels, and this is especially pleasing as we have witnessed the unfortunate further reduction in the provision of banking facilities in Gibraltar. Mr. Speaker, we were right to have decided to set up the bank in 2013, right to have established an independent board of directors, and right to have allowed the executive team to get on with the job of driving Gibraltar International Bank forward. The results, Mr. Speaker, speak for themselves. Just 2 years after its doors opened, the bank has over 10,000 accounts opened, £440 million deposited, and over 90 million in loans. I must again thank the Board of Directors, Lawrence and Derek, and each and every member of the team at the bank for their spectacular work. Mr. Speaker, we have also continued the excellent work on our legislative reform programme, which we expect to complete early in 2018. This will have a significant impact on both regulator and private firms, and I am confident that this will be most welcome by all. The first sector consultation will commence on the 12th of July and continue for the rest of the year. I am grateful to the Finance Centre Council for agreeing to be actively engaged in this process. Mr. Speaker, they have agreed to set up a dedicated subcommittee to consider and consult with us on all the pre-consultation documents that we'll be sending them on a very regular basis for the remainder of this year. Mr. Speaker, Sarah Hall and Ernest Lima have driven this project with us, and I'm grateful to them also. Mr. Speaker, the quality of the work of the Financial Services Commission in all of these areas are also worthy of mention. Each of the members of the many teams I have worked with have delivered professional, dependable, and expert advice and support to a high quality. From its chairman, Jonathan Spencer, and its CEO, Samantha Barras, to all the other individual members of the team, my sincere thanks to them all. Mr. Speaker, government is most appreciative of the work of all private sector firms, associations, and individuals who work with us throughout the year. The list is endless, but we are grateful to each and every one of them, as we are especially to the members of the Brexit Working Group who have excelled in their detailed work on the best way forward for our jurisdiction. Mr. Speaker, before turning to gaming, I must thank Mr. Jimmy Tipping, the CEO and my right-hand man in this area, and his fantastic team at Gibraltar Finance for the superb work they deliver every year and with such calm and ease. Jimmy has inter alia driven our complex discussions on the UBO register, which was launched yesterday, and will perhaps best be remembered for his outstanding performance in defending Gibraltar's corner at the often hostile PANA committee hearings in Brussels. Mr. Speaker, in turning to gaming, I would say that notwithstanding the tumultuous political year in Europe, and especially the UK, some in the popular media wished to find bad news stories about the remote gambling industry rather than the good news it remains. I will take this opportunity to confirm that none of our licensees is currently undertaking a Brexit-based restructure that might see its Gibraltar establishment transplanted to a different jurisdiction. Both my staff and myself are in regular liaison with all of our licensees. And yes, while the shape and features of Brexit creates uncertainty and licensees change the nature, size, and shape of their operations as markets, products, technology, and the political landscape develops, Gibraltar licensees are looking at the mitigating factors that they may need to apply should some of the Brexit risks materialise. Mr. Speaker, that is not planning to leave Gibraltar, but sensible and prudent scenario planning by sensible and prudent companies, the type of company we are keen to license and welcome to Gibraltar. None of us here can predict what a 2019 Brexit will look like. Indeed, whether it will be in 2019, or we may only have clarity of what it will look like in 2019. But what I can assure members is that as those details do become clear, this government will still be pressing for measures and taking its own measures to ensure that the Gibraltar arrangements remain the most attractive and supportive in Europe, if not the world. The major players in this industry continue to beat a path to our door to invest here, to operate here, and to be associated here as they have done for the last 20 years and more. As in previous years, there remains a constant flow of highly credible and respected names in the remote industry engaging in discussions with our licensing and regulatory teams about Gibraltar licensing. Such inquiries and developments have been taking place at a time of unprecedented mergers and acquisitions in this sector. We are now in the fourth year of escalating M&A that far exceeds the impact of Brexit, and M&A is not going to end soon. M&A has affected over half of all our licensees and 15 of the current crop of 30 license holders. In 4 years, it has seen 9 licensees absorbed into bigger companies, and those 9 licenses expire, and 6 other licensees become significant parts of bigger companies. Mr. Speaker, this consolidation means that the total number of licensees is standing still, despite the new arrivals. In the last 12 months, in April 16 and March 17, we have seen 5 new operators issued with licenses, whilst 5 existing license holders have been surrendered, with 2 of our biggest licensees merging. Where there were 31 licensees at this time last year, there are now 30. But I anticipate a possible 4 more being issued in months to come as licensing plans come to fruition. But likewise, consolidation and the apparent loss of licenses will continue. Correspondingly, Mr. Speaker, employment in the sector has seen continued growth of 101 posts during the year to a new high of 3,353 as at the 31st of March 2017. And as the CM has already mentioned, an increase of 9% from October 2015 to October 2016. We must not forget that staff can be hugely unsettled by the wave that industry consolidation may bring. However, this is the nature of this incredibly dynamic industry, and we are happy to work with the industry and their staff to ensure that the government can play its part in supporting this sector, which continues to thrive. Mr. Speaker, government receipts from the industry, charges, taxes, fees, continue to increase significantly as the industry grows and will be reported separately. However, the closure of the GBGA POC tax case does create the opportunity to review and reshape the way in which the gambling industry contributes to the revenues of government. I plan to discuss with the industry in months to come how we can both modernise and consolidate the current charges into a simpler and more consistent model of taxation and fees. It is incumbent on me to make clear that this is not a proposal to implement a structural increase in those charges, but look to bring them up to date and better reflect the revenues and costs of the industry some 20 years since they were introduced. This work will also allow us to resurrect the review of the Gambling Act, initiated in 2014 but deferred for 12 months following the Brexit vote. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the biggest change this year will be the retirement of our Gambling Commissioner and Head of Regulation, Mr. Phil Breer, at the end of this year. Phil will have served a full 10 years in his posts here in Gibraltar and seen through a transformation of the industry between 2007 and 2017, a transformation that he believes is yet to end. The process for the appointment of his replacement, indeed likely replacements, is now underway, and I am confident we will have a strong new team identified and in place by the time Phil's tenure comes to an end in October. Phil's contribution to this sector cannot be underestimated, and it will be difficult to replace him. He has been an exceptional servant to Gibraltar, and I repeat my view that he is one of the best, if not the best, online gaming regulator in the world. And Mr. Speaker, we are most fortunate to have had him here. His contribution is recognised by the industry, regulators and governments, and I am equally confident we will soon conclude arrangements that ensure both a smooth transition for the new team, as well as, I am delighted to report, his continued involvement in the development and oversight of the gambling industry in Gibraltar. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, another stalwart of the gambling division has recently moved on. Lorraine Brito has been the driver of the engine room of the gambling division for some 8 years and is soon to be replaced. I take this opportunity to thank once again the outstanding efforts of Lorraine and thank her for her work with us and indeed the licensing and regulatory teams in maintaining Gibraltar's reputation as a first-tier jurisdiction. Their work continues to be exceptional. Mr. Speaker, I will end by emphasising that government remains committed to a strong and supportive legislative, regulatory and taxation regime for the gambling industry, remote and non-remote. I will continue to meet with industry leaders on a regular basis to ensure their interests and concerns are properly understood and that Gibraltar remains the preferred jurisdiction for their operations. I must also thank the Brexit Working Group for their continued expertise and support as we jointly plot the exciting future for this sector. Speaker, I turn to the Liaison Department, which was set up in September 2013. Its function has evolved over time from its original concept to facilitate and support the gaming and finance centre industries with their interaction with all government departments. Their work is constantly recognised by these sectors as they continue to provide necessary support to them. The unit also provides invaluable assistance to my ministry in a number of different areas as we work towards developing a new framework for interaction between citizens, businesses and government. I am most grateful to Lizanne Ocello and Tania Pereira for their work in all of these areas and more, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, if I can move to commerce, it has been a pleasure working this year with the Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Small Businesses in meeting their members' needs. They are always forthright, honest and well-intended. And although we may not always agree, we certainly make progress for the benefit of Gibraltar PLC. We have worked on many areas this year, and we will, as a result of this close working relationship, shortly be consulting on further improvements to our business environment as a result of that close working relationship. Mr. Speaker, if I may turn to the Office of Fair Trading, or the OFT as it's better known. I am happy to report that the OFT has finished its first full year of operations, making substantial advances in the manner in which it delivers its services for the benefit of businesses and consumers alike. During this time, the office has settled well into its new regulatory role and has made noteworthy progress in trying to meet the ambitious objectives and responsibilities set for it by the Fair Trading Act of 2015. As with any new project, Mr. Speaker, it has been a steep learning curve for the office and its staff, particularly with the addition of new responsibilities, and consequently, this project remains very much a work in progress. We are working on a review of the Fair Trading Act, together with the Federation of Small Businesses and the Chamber of Commerce, which will make the process of setting up business in Gibraltar even simpler and more efficient, while at the same time bolstering the protection afforded to consumers. As an aside, Mr. Speaker, it's interesting to note that the OFT was introduced by my good and learned friend, Minister Costa, really at the request of the Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Small Businesses. They, in fact, drove the detail of what government was seeking to achieve. And it's right that we review the steps that we've taken with them, and ironically, at their request, are changing a number of the things that they originally asked us to implement in the legislation. So it's an example of that continuing partnership that we enjoy with both business associations. I have no doubt that once these changes are drafted and announced, they will be most welcome by the business community. Mr. Speaker, the OFT has been given the responsibility of regulating high-value dealers and real estate agents in Gibraltar from an anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing perspective. On the 15th September 2016, the OFT was appointed as a supervisory authority under the Proceeds of Crimes Act, with the objective of preventing the laundering of illicit funds using those businesses. This is a substantial new role, working relentlessly to set up new, practical anti-money laundering measures and procedures for the effective regulation of high-value dealers and real estate agents. All this is also being done in anticipation of Gibraltar's upcoming Moneyval assessment, which is due to take place at the end of next year. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the OFT's consumer protection responsibilities. The nature of the work carried out by the team, which was previously the Department of Consumer Affairs, has shifted from a mediatory role to a regulatory one. The ultimate aim of the current protection team is therefore to prevent significant harm to consumers in Gibraltar and not to offer redress. If I may turn to business licensing, Mr. Speaker, since the introduction of the Act, which extended the requirement for licensing to service providers, the number of licenses issued by the BLA has more than doubled. There are now approximately 2,000 licensed businesses operating in Gibraltar. The office has been extremely busy dealing with a constant stream of applications, and this surge, while expected, has led to very high workloads as the previously unlicensed businesses have been applying for their new licenses. Unlicensed not because they were in breach, but because they weren't required to be. I am happy to say, Mr. Speaker, that the team has dealt with this extra work well. And in terms of tackling unlicensed businesses, a strategic program has been introduced to tackle this issue on a sector-by-sector basis. The business licensing team has the ability to deploy its consumer protection enforcers to investigate businesses that it suspects or is informed are not in possession of a valid business license. Mr. Speaker, I must thank Mr. Francis Muscat and his team for their superb work in making a success of this new and exciting project. We have lots more to do in streamlining and improving these processes, but this is only possible because of their commitment and ability to respond to these challenges and to embrace further responsibility in the manner that they have. I am grateful to each and every one of them. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to my responsibilities for the Royal Gibraltar Post Office. Mr. Speaker, I am looking forward this year to engaging with the management and staff of the RGPO, together with Unite, to review all aspects of the postal service. There is no question that as technology reduces the use of ordinary mail and the global economy, and in particular online purchasing, significantly increases the quantum of postal purchases and parcel deliveries, there is an opportunity to review how we operate and serve the public's needs in the best way possible. I intend to work through all of these areas with the team at the RGPO and Unite, and I'm confident that we will together agree a sensible and fair way forward for all parties concerned. These discussions will start immediately. I must thank the entire team at the RGPO for their continued work and dedication in meeting the needs of our community, and I know they will be willing partners in this process. Mr. Speaker, last year the RGPO announced that it was the first postal service to launch the UN Universal Postal Union Customs Declaration kiosk system, which sends advanced electronic information to other countries. As from the 1st of January 2020, it will be a mandatory requirement for all postal items containing goods to send advanced electronic information to all the other authorities around the world. Mr. Speaker, in April this year, the RGPO signed the new multilateral agreement in respect of a new tracked packet service, and in September, the RGPO has planned negotiations with Royal Mail to discuss the introduction of the new International Merchandise Return Service, IMRS, which is a tracked postage paid return service designed to meet the demands of bulk mail operations. Growth in this area may present significant opportunities for the RGPO to grow its business. The government is looking at ways to adapt its products and services to make bulk mailing operations based in Gibraltar more attractive. Mr. Speaker, we are also working with British Airways World Cargo on the possibility of introducing radio frequency identification transponders to give 100% visibility of mailbags in the BA cargo shed at London Heathrow to create more visibility of the transport of mail. Mr. Speaker, since 2013, the Post Office has coordinated a local letter writing competition with the Department of Education. Each year, the winning letter is forwarded to the UN UPU International Letter Writing Competition. In 2016, Mr. Speaker, Anna Grech from Westside Comprehensive School became the first Gibraltarian to reach the top 13 out of 980,000 applicants, for which I presented her with various prizes donated by the UPU. A remarkable achievement and a real attempt to preserve the magical art of letter writing. Mr. Speaker, my thanks to David Ledger, Sabina Pitaluga, Joe Brosco, and all of their teams for their hard work during the course of this year. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to ITLD. Mr. Speaker, HM Government Gibraltar aims to be the leader in providing digital electronic services by making the best possible use of information and communication technologies, to bring interactive government counters to the doorsteps of citizens and businesses, providing services anytime, anyhow, and anywhere. But, Mr. Speaker, that is easier said than done, especially when you simultaneously engage in keeping the entire government network working and dealing with supporting, designing, and caring for every single government department, and to boot, dealing with the ever-increasing threat of cybercrime. I must thank the IT team for their excellent work in dealing with recent well-reported cyber attacks, which have seen them covering our systems 24/7, excuse me, Speaker, to ensure we are as best protected as we can be. They have served us well, and we are truly grateful to them. There is much work to be done in the area of cybercrime, and we will continue to develop our plans for this. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank Tyron Magnasco and his team of professionals in the IT department for all their hard work during the year. I have personally seen the extent of their remit, and am most grateful for their commitment to serving our needs. Mr. Speaker, government is committed to delivering e-government, and a huge amount of work is being undertaken to deliver this. Yes, Mr. Speaker, this is taking longer than we would have liked, but I am confident that we will deliver a service which the community will appreciate and be proud of once it arrives. Mr. Speaker, we are reviewing every single aspect of our IT systems, including all arrangements with existing suppliers of services in this area and the internal arrangements within government departments in what our needs are and how we operate. All of these, Mr. Speaker, are being audited, as are our intended digital strategy. We are taking time, Mr. Speaker, to verify our systems and our needs to ensure compatibility and functionality across all of our services. In brief, Mr. Speaker, our digital strategy will deliver e-administration, which will provide the entire government with an operational system that will revolutionise how we work. The first phase, our procurement system, has already been introduced, and suppliers are registering as we speak, and we expect to go live very shortly. Any provider of goods or services to government, its agencies or its companies will require to register on our system. E-Citizen, which will provide all citizens with a secure online portal to coordinate their entire interaction with government. E-Business, which will provide a secure online portal for businesses to transact their business with government directly and indirectly. Mr. Speaker, this resume belies the extent of the change and the efficiencies that this will provide us with. There are a number of workflows running in parallel which will deliver a new way of doing business with government, all built on a stable, robust, and resilient network. Mr. Speaker, this is an enormous undertaking, and I'm grateful to all the many parties who are assisting us in making this a reality. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Stephen Ramage and Christabel from our procurement department are currently working on the procurement system, and I'd especially like to mention them and thank them for their work in bringing this project in that phase to its fruition. I must especially thank, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Julian Baldacchino, who is driving this project across government with an enthusiasm and energy which is critical to the success of this project. His determination matches government's desire to make this a reality, and he is ably supported by Mr. Karen Cano on secondment from our IT department for this project. Mr. Speaker, a truly exciting time for the government. I am very excited about the work, as I believe this process will bring about perhaps one of the largest transformational changes the government has seen, and certainly in the last generation. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to thank my Secretary, Lourdes Piri, who incidentally had her husband and daughter receive medals at the Island Games in Gotland yesterday, and all the team in my office who are always there for me, providing a professional service and always supporting the work I do with a smile and a grin on their faces, whatever the challenge. They are a credit to the civil service, and I'm most grateful to each and every one of them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.